Welcome back to the Climate Layer. I'm Alex Bonat. I built this show to cut through the noise, to find a space where climate misinformation meets honest conversation, real facts, and genuine human connection. I had a vision for what it would look like, what it would sound like, and without question, I always knew what the logo would be. A gentleman polar bear. It was never a question. It was just always there in my head. The bear, the top hat, the whole thing. And then recently, my wife asked me a question I was not prepared for. Why a polar bear? And I stopped, because the honest answer was, I have never actually explained that. Not to her, not to you, not to anyone. Across 14 episodes, across years of building this concept in my head, I'd never once sat down and articulated why this particular animal in a top hat represents everything I'm trying to do here. There is a story, and I think it's worth telling, because the polar bear is not just a logo choice, it's a statement of values. And understanding why I chose it tells you something important about why this show exists. So today, we're going to talk about the polar bear, why I chose it, what it means to me, the history of this animal as one of the most powerful symbols in climate communication, and why I think its plight is worth being genuinely moved by. So let's start with the animal itself. The polar bear is one of the most remarkable animals on this planet. It is the largest land carnivore on Earth. Adult males can weigh over 1,000 pounds. They can swim for days across open ocean. They have evolved over hundreds of thousands of years to survive conditions that would kill almost any other creature. Temperatures that drop to 60 below zero, months of complete darkness, a landscape that is almost entirely ice and water. And they thrive in it. Not just survive, thrive. Here's what fascinates me most about polar bears. They are intelligent hunters. They don't just overpower their prey, they think, they wait. They understand the behavior of the animals they hunt. They've been observed using tools, planning approaches, adapting their strategies based on changing conditions. These are not just big animals running on instinct, they are problem solvers. They share that quality with wolves and orcas, the other apex predators I've always been drawn to. What connects these three animals is not just that they sit at the top of their food chains, it is that they got there through intelligence, adaptability, and an extraordinary capacity to find solutions in brutal environments. And we are making it nearly impossible for them to survive. The Arctic is warming 4 times faster than the rest of the planet. The sea ice polar bears depend on for hunting is disappearing. Their hunting seasons are getting shorter. Their ranges are shrinking. They are traveling farther for less food. Some populations are already in serious decline. An animal that evolved over hundreds of thousands of years to master the most extreme environment on Earth is being undone in decades. Not by something it did, by what we did. That has to mean something. The polar bear has become one of the most recognizable symbols of climate change. And I want to be honest about something. That symbolism comes with criticism. Some people find it manipulative. A big white bear on melting ice is designed to make you feel something, and some critics argue that leading with emotion rather than data is a cheap way to win an argument. That it oversimplifies a complex issue, that it is more about pulling heartstrings than building understanding. I hear that criticism, and I think it's worth engaging with directly rather than dismissing. Here's what I believe. Emotion is not the opposite of reason. Emotion is what makes reason matter. Data without context does not move people. Facts without meaning do not change behavior. The polar bear became the face of climate change not because environmentalists chose it cynically, but because it works, because it connects something abstract, global average temperatures, parts per million of carbon dioxide, to something real and visible and alive. The polar bear did not ask to be a symbol, it just exists. It's just trying to survive. And the fact that its survival is threatened by our collective behavioral is not manipulation. It's the truth. What I've always loved about the polar bear as a symbol is its dignity. It's not a helpless creature. It's not a victim by nature. It's one of the most powerful and capable animals that has ever walked this planet. The fact that it's struggling is not a reflection of its weakness. It's a reflection of the scale of what we have done to the systems it depends on. That distinction matters to me, which brings me to the gentleman. So why the top hat? Because I didn't want a symbol of pity. I wanted a symbol of dignity. When I think about how we talk about climate change, there is a tendency to lean on images of suffering. Dying animals, flooded cities, cracked earth, and those images are real and they matter. But they can also trigger a specific kind of response in people, one that feels more like despair than action. If the narrative is that everything is already lost, why would you bother changing anything? The gentleman polar bear is a different kind of statement from me. It says this animal is extraordinary. It has earned our respect, not our pity, not our guilt, but our respect. The top hat is not ironic. It's not a joke per se. It's an acknowledgement that this creature is remarkable, that it deserves to be taken seriously, and that the way we talk about its plight should reflect that. It is also, honestly, a little bit of a signal about the tone of the show. We're going to take the science seriously. We're going to be honest about the challenges, but we're not going to wallow in doom. We're going to lead with respect for the science, for the animals, for the people most affected, and for the audience. So, in another way, I want to tell you about a commercial. In 2010, Nissan ran an advertisement for the Leaf, their electric vehicle. In it, a polar bear living in the Arctic watches the ice melt around it. It travels south through changing landscapes, past highways and power lines in suburban neighborhoods. And at the end of the journey, it finds a man getting into his Nissan Leaf in his driveway, and it hugs him. That's it. No voiceover explaining carbon emissions, no statistics about sea level rise, just a polar bear, a journey, and a hug for someone who made a different choice. I remember watching that commercial and feeling something shift in me, because it made the connection completely clear in about 60 seconds. The choices we make every day, what we drive, how we power our homes, what we buy, aren't abstract. They travel. They have consequences that reach further than we can see. And somewhere, something is affected by them. That is the ripple effect. That's what I keep coming back to in this show. Not because individual choices solve everything on their own. They don't, and I get that. But because understanding the connection between what we do and what happens in places we will never see is the beginning of something. It's where consciousness becomes action. That commercial planted a seed that eventually became this show. And that polar bear traveling south to say thank you became the foundation of a logo. And so, thinking around that, I actually kind of want to talk about Steve Irwin for a moment. For those of you who grew up watching The Crocodile Hunter, you know probably what I'm about to say. Steve Irwin was one of the greatest conservation communicators who ever lived. Not because he had the best data, not because he published in peer-reviewed journals, but because he made you feel what he felt. Genuine, overwhelming, contagious love for the natural world. He would hold a snake that could kill him and his face would light up like a child on Christmas morning. He would wade into a crocodile's territory and speak about it with such reverence and excitement that you couldn't help but see the animal the way he saw it. Not as a threat, not as something to fear or control, but as something extraordinary that deserved to exist. That communication model is what I think about when I think about how to talk about climate change. Not leading with doom, not leading with guilt, but leading with wonder, with respect, with a genuine belief that the natural world is worth protecting not because it's useful to us, but because it's magnificent. Steve Irwin never made conservation feel like a sacrifice. He made it feel like the most obvious thing in the world. Of course you'd want to protect this. Look at it. Look at how extraordinary it is. That's a wonderful model. And that's what I'm trying to do with this show. So, I want to get on a soapbox for a moment. Please bear with me. No pun intended. For my pets, I have a husky and I have a Bengal cat. Anyone who has a husky knows they are spectacular and absolutely impossible in equal measure. My Bengal cat has opinions about everything and is not shy about sharing them. These animals are part of my family, and caring for them, really caring for them, means more than feeding them and keeping them warm. It means understanding their needs, their instincts, their nature. It means finding a kind of partnership with creatures that experience the world completely different than I, as a human being, do. To me, I see that as empathy, and it's not weakness. It's one of the most sophisticated things our species does, and that's empathy. There's a strange cultural moment happening right now where empathy is being positioned as a flaw, as softness, as something that makes you vulnerable or naive. And I really want to push back on that as clearly as I can. Empathy is what got us here. The ability to understand and care about experiences beyond our own is one of the defining features of human civilization. It's what allows us to build communities, to cooperate at scale, to create systems of care and justice and mutual support. Without empathy, none of that works. And in the context of climate change, empathy is not just a nice thing to have, it's a strategic necessity. Because the people most affected by climate change are often the people who contributed least to causing it. Low-income communities bearing the brunt of pollution, island nations disappearing under rising seas, indigenous communities watching the ecosystems they have stewarded for generations collapse, and animals like the polar bear that had no say in any of it. If we can't extend our concern beyond our immediate experience, we will never build the collective will to address a problem of this scale. Empathy is not the soft option. It's the only option that actually works. My pets are not directly threatened by climate change in the way a polar bear is, but the biodiversity they represent matters. The ecosystems that make their lives and ours possible are under pressure. And when I look at them, my dog and my cat, I'm reminded that we share this planet with an extraordinary range of creatures who are counting on us to get this right. Not because they understand what we're doing, but because we do. That responsibility is not a burden, it's a privilege. So to close things off, I started this show because I was frustrated. Frustrated by the noise, frustrated by the misinformation, frustrated by watching the same false narratives I had spent years fighting professionally come back louder and with more institutional backing than ever. But underneath that frustration is something else, something that the gentleman polar bear represents more than anything. Hope and love for this planet, for the creatures on it, for the systems that make all of it possible. I have a child. I'm not going to say their name because some things are private and because this is not really about my kid. It's about all of them. Every kid being born right now into a world that is changing faster than we have ever seen. Every future generation that will inherit the consequences of decisions being made today. I am building this show for them, for my child specifically, for the next generations to come, but also for my husky and for my cat in their own way. For the polar bears traveling south across a warming world, for every community facing the consequences of something they didn't cause, for everyone who has felt the weight of this and wondered whether it's worth still trying. It is worth it. The polar bear didn't choose to become a symbol. It didn't choose to become the face of the crisis it had no part in creating. It's just trying to survive, using the extraordinary intelligence and adaptability that evolution gave it, in conditions that are getting harder every year. So the least we can do is be worthy of that. Make those small decisions that add up. Demand better systems. Tell the true story. And lead with wonder, with respect, and with the kind of empathy that our species is actually capable of when we choose to use it. That is why the logo is a gentleman polar bear. That's why the show exists. So, if you're new here, go back and check out the previous episodes. We've covered everything from planetary boundaries and ocean health to climate misinformation, battery storage, water scarcity, and the war on science. There's a lot to dig into. If you have questions, thoughts, or just want to reach out, email us at theclimatelayer@gmail.com. I read everything. And if this episode resonated with you, please subscribe so you never miss one, and share it with someone who you think needs to hear it. Thanks for listening. I'm Alex Bernard, and this is The Climate Layer.